Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the McShin Foundation's award-winning recovery podcast, Get in the Herd. I'm your host, Nathan Mitchell. Today, welcome back, everybody. It's been 2 weeks, pretty much, where we had one little episode, but it's really great to be back here in the seat. We've got some new tables, some new stuff going on. Justin back there got his hair cut. So we're really excited to dive right in and to get back into some recovery work. So today, our special guest is Anthony Lehane. Now, I'm going to call him Ant, but I'm going to call him Anthony. I'll probably go back and forth. And Anthony comes if you can understand him. No, I'm kidding. Anthony's coming to us from the UK. He's coming from London today. And he is the head of communications for an organization called Anthony. What is the name of the organization? Voltface.
Yes.
All right. And tell us, Anthony, I know what that word means because, of course, I Googled it and looked it up. But tell us what it is that Voltface does and what the word means. And welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me on, Nathan. It's great to be here. And just to give the listeners a quick update, I was supposed to be on a few weeks ago and I came down with COVID. So I'm delighted to have finally made it here. I've been working at the advocacy organization called Voltface for about 3.5 years now. Voltface kind of works in the third sector on the fringes of politics. We try and lobby government to create more sensible drug policies which reduce the harm the drugs cause to people who use them and to society at large. And we try and just champion harm reduction policies, sensible, safer drug policies. We originally started out as a blog, like kind of drug policy blog. And then we transitioned into kind of advocacy group, think tank. We create policy reports. We start campaign groups. I'm also the secretary for a group called the Labour Campaign for Drug Policy Reform, which works specifically with the opposition party in the United Kingdom, who don't have a particularly good drug policy, I'll be completely honest. So we're sort of trying to work within the party to bring people on side. And, you know, as a left-wing party, I really think a drug policy rooted in fairness, justice, and equality should be at the heart of everything we do. But whilst they champion socialist and social justice policies elsewhere, drugs have been left behind. And I think that's to do with the kind of political hot potatoeness of it. But we're trying to change those opinions to create a Voltface, which is a political U-turn.
I love that. I'm so glad to, I was neglected to ask you how to pronounce that right before the show. And as the theme was playing, I looked over at Justin. I said, "Oh shoot, I don't know how to say that."
Are you talking about Voltface?
Voltface. Yeah,
I was saying Voltface all day today. I was like Voltface.
I was doing the Voltface. I was doing like an Italian interpretation. But anyway, I knew it meant like a political about face. What I love that you brought up was the liberal and the conservative side, right? And I know that this is a struggle we have in the United States as well. And here in Virginia and in the United States, for most of the United States, a possession charge for narcotics is a felony. It's a felony charge. And I don't know everywhere in the country, but I know in Virginia, you can get sentenced for up to 10 years in prison on a felony possession charge. And for the first charge. Now there's a first offender's disposition, but this all is incumbent upon somebody using once and never using again. And of course, we know in recovery that's very often not the case. So it really does go down this cycle of continued incarceration, mass incarceration. However, so in Virginia, in the last General Assembly session, the beginning of this year, the primary session, what they did was they tried to introduce legislation that would defelonize or reclassify. This is something that Robert and I talk about all the time. Robert Legg, Anthony, and and it's something that I'm really, because it affects me personally. I'm a felon because of a possession charge, because I don't think that's fair, not getting the help we need. But we have examples in the country, of conservative bastions who have passed very similar legislation. And I'm only just learning about that. And it's really Robert who's been putting this at the forefront. States like Oklahoma and Alaska, and I believe Iowa, states where you wouldn't normally see, this presumably left-wing ideology. So there's some hope there, and I'm sure that they've approached it in different ways. How are you approaching the conservative who are in power right now? How are you approaching that as far as getting things done?
Well, that's right. We've got a very strong conservative majority at this moment in time. Traditionally, the Liberal Democrats have been the ones to champion drug reform in the United Kingdom. There was a report which was released 2 weeks or so ago, which was commissioned by a sort of a Home Office department which deals with drugs. And that report, which is independent, found that we can't police our way out of this. Now, the Conservative government, very sadly, instead of capitalizing on the recommendations of, more money for treatment, wraparound care, more rehabilitation beds, they've decided to do the classic Conservative thing of talk tough on drugs. We're going to clamp down on the dealers. We're going to go after the supply. And the Misuse of Drugs Act turned 50 years old here this year, and it's been an unmitigated disaster. So in sort of terms of trying to communicate with Conservatives and try and change opinions, it depends on what area of reform we're looking at. One big thing at the moment we're having here is there's a lot of very tragic, as clubs have opened up, it's kind of teen ecstasy deaths. I think that's something that a lot of people can resonate with, and the paper seems to get more behind. I think we try and talk to social conservatives about the need to, protect citizens, protect our communities, to sort of try and speak to them in frames that they will understand. It's in a lot of ways, the UK is quite far behind America because we don't have ballot initiatives in this country. So the only reform that we've had in the last 20 years or something has been cannabis for medical use. And that's in itself is very difficult to obtain if you don't have a lot of money. So yeah, we're struggling, but the signs are still quite positive.
Well, that's interesting. And that's interesting that you mentioned ballot initiatives, because that's a state by state thing. And I don't believe we have that available here in Virginia. I'm pretty sure we don't, unless it has to do with amending our state constitution. But you allude to something really important, because it is that ballot initiative. If you look at Oregon on the Pacific West Coast, right? And as you probably know, they legalized Utah, not Iowa. Thanks, Robert. As you know, in Oregon, they legalized, or they decriminalized, all drug use there.
Yeah.
And so some of the lessons that we're learning from this, as they're looking at this, as a possible Portugal flip, we call that here in the United States, or we've been calling it the Portugal flip, is, bringing a Portugal model to drugs to the United States, where we're not celebrating the use of the drugs. We're actually letting people get the help they need instead of shaming and blaming. And if you look at the numbers in Portugal, that's 20 some odd years now they've had this decriminalization. Overdose deaths are nothing there. And Portugal is just about the same size. I think it's just a little bit bigger than Virginia. So, it's like, why can't we do this here in the United States? What is, if the idea is to save lives and protect people, if public safety is the issue, well, then we're doing it wrong. And I'll give an example. We talked about fentanyl before the show, and I realized that this hasn't really crossed over to the UK as much of an issue as it is here. And fentanyl, and it's what do you call that? The different versions of fentanyl, the carfentanil,
analogs, like carfentanil and things.
Exactly. Yeah, because they just keep, switching up the chemical formula, tweaking the formula, to use the word tweak, tweaking the formula a little bit, to get through. And they just, what I just read yesterday in the New York Times was, they keep tweaking the formula, and the law keeps getting on top of that and on top of that and on top of that. Like, well, what if we stop doing that? What if we just stop doing that and actually get people the help they need? Because I'm a person who uses drugs, in a way that is self-destructive. I'm a person in recovery now, but I'm a person that when I put drugs in my body, I'm going to be destructive about it. So, there's something I need to address. You're not going to address that in a jail or a court necessarily. You're not going to address that by putting me in a box alone to think about how awful I am, and to continue telling me I'm an awful person, because I'm going to get out of there. And for the most part, I'm going to be pretty angry and bitter. And I mean, that's been, So
the self-esteem thing, I think, is so big, right? If someone keeps telling you, you're labeled horribly, you're put through the court system, you come out with low self-esteem, and, a lot of people with addiction problems obviously have adverse childhood trauma or some kind of trauma. And then when you combine low self-esteem with the level of trauma, then it's a sort of repetitive cycle of destruction and often criminality alongside that, so it's a really needless cycle of destruction.
Yeah. And we don't we don't not every here's what I'm learning is that not everybody who's arrested on drug charges is a person with an addiction problem. And that's something, me, very rather naively, I suppose, didn't realize until probably a year ago or so. Oh, wait a second. Not everybody needs, this extensive recovery and everything around it. What we need is a safer drug supply. We need to have, and Rhode Island here in Virginia, in the United States, became the first state in the country to legalize safe, we call them safe consumption sites or safe injection sites.
Yeah.
I prefer the word consumption because not everybody's an injective, using injection, but safe consumption sites. And I think that's a real compassionate way of dealing with this crisis and meeting people where they are. So what about things like that? How does that work in the UK? And perhaps, we talked about the differences between Scotland and Wales and England. So talk about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. So very quickly on your point about the analogs being changed very minorly to avoid, it being grouped with other substances. We actually had a really bad bill in 2016 in the United Kingdom called the New Psychosubstances Act. Now, the reason that came around predominantly was because there was these new, when I was like 16, there was a thing called methadone, and it was very cheap and you could buy it in a head shop on the street, a place that sells bongs, and people were going crazy on it, like staying up for days. It was a very strong, like caffeine substance. So they banned that, and then they made a new caffeine substance, which was again, one more oxygen molecule or something very similar. And then that got banned. They brought another one. So it's like a game of whack-a-mole, right? They shut one down, another one pops up. But then exactly, literally. And then what happened after that is that people started realizing they could make quite a lot of money with these synthetic drugs and imported a lot from China. And then synthetic cannabis became very big here, what we now call spice. And all the New Psychosubstances Act did was push the spice underground, and the big cohort of people who use spice now are people who are homeless, and it's incredibly tragic. All it's done is change chemicals, made them more potent. So to answer your question, if you keep playing this whack-a-mole game, it doesn't work. We need safer supply. Like heroin-assisted treatment exists in a couple of places in the UK, but it's only about 40 people on there. And then on the point around sort of overdose prevention centers and sort of the harm reduction tools we have here, overdose prevention centers are kind of the political football being kicked between the Scottish devolved government and the UK-wide government. So the Scottish National Party against the Conservative-wide UK party. And the reason for that is that the SNP really want independence, but the Conservatives don't want them to have independence. The SNP claim they want to implement overdose prevention centres. The Labour government up there claim that they could do it. They're just choosing not to do it. The Conservatives are saying it's no silver bullet. It won't do anything. We shouldn't encourage drug use. So it's become this really horrible political hot potato. There's a guy, and I believe similar things happened in North America and Canada, where someone took it upon themselves, seeing the dreadful levels of drug-related deaths, to do something about it. So he crowdfunded and bought a old disused ambulance, and he packed that out with the sort of requisite tools and trained himself in naloxone and how to inject people, etc., and just started doing it on his own and said to the police, if you want to come and arrest me, I dare you. And that kicked off a really big sort of PR campaign from some of the newspapers up there, and it looks like we're finally going to get overdose prevention centres in Scotland, but not because the government up there, to my understanding, really wanted to do it, more that they were forced with no other option than to do it.
Well, and I love that we're having this conversation about harm reduction, because it's something, it's new for me, and I work, I'm a person in recovery. I work in an abstinence-based recovery program, and I'm going to continue doing that. I work a one day at a time program, so I'll do that today and hopefully do that again tomorrow. But so what is the landscape of recovery in the United Kingdom? So what is the access to, we call them recovery support services, or the whole realm of services that are necessary for recovery, but also, what is it like to, say, walk into an AA meeting or an NA meeting, a 12-step, are they easy to find? Is this something, recovery Dharma is something I personally do. It's a Buddhist recovery pathway. What's it like up there? It's a really cool book, actually.
Sounds great. Yeah. No, I'll take a note of it afterwards. Actually, it sounds really interesting. So the NA and AA meetings, my understanding, are completely separate from government funding. So I believe they're quite easy to get on. I've got quite a few friends from the space that I've worked in and my personal life who are in recovery, and a lot of those go to NA meetings, and they seem very frequent, and particularly with lockdown in a city like London of 10 million people, there are a lot of them. So that type of recovery is still very popular here, and I believe access to it is very easy. The issue with government sanctioned funding is that around 10 years ago, I think maybe it was 8 years ago, and this is in correlation to when drug death started to really spiral, we've been slashing and decimating our drug treatment budgets year on year. The funding's gone down. It's now at kind of like a shoestring budget. I mean, I've the utmost respect for colleagues I have who work in recovery, and they all do an incredible job. However, a lot of them work much longer hours than they're supposed to. They're underpaid, a lot of volunteer, and essentially the whole sector is being propped up by people who work very stressful jobs who are hugely underpaid. And I think a lot of them are doing it because they were, had a problematic substance disorder once, and they understand the difficulties. So in short, it's very difficult to get on recovery programs. I think some people using like a methadone program, probably not so difficult, but it's not something that I've ever tried to do, so I couldn't really answer that. But in short, the drug treatment sector here has been forced down to its knees because of bare budgeting and cuts.
Well, so an organization, like McShin, for instance, the McShin Foundation, we're a not-for-profit organization, and we our entire mission is authentic peer recovery. So I'm a person in recovery. My boss, and shout out to John Shinholzer, one of the founders. He's the Shin of McShin. John celebrates 39 years of sustained recovery today. So shout out to John today, by the way. But
amazing.
Amazing. And both of our founders, Carol McDade, she's the Mick of McShin, and John Shinholzer are both in recovery. My direct boss is in recovery. My CEO is in recovery. Justin over here is in recovery, barely. I'm messing with him. And for the most part, we're that authentic peer recovery, which means that, when I'm doing recovery coach sessions with somebody, I may not exactly have been in the exact same shoes, but those feelings are very, very relatable. And often we find, we gravitate towards coach and coachee relationships here that tend to be a little more sympathetic or empathetic, I guess. But even still, there's a lot of relatability, and I find when I'm in my happiest when I go over to our intensive house, with the fresh, you guys, just like I was, coming in, right off the street. Well, I was coming from jail, but coming in from jail or from the street, I just sit in there and just share a meal with people, share a meal with each other, and really get that sense of community, because that's what recovery means to me. It's building community. So, I love the authentic nature of what we do here, and I don't know a lot about the rest of the world, or even the world that I'm in over here, frankly. But I can tell you that authentic thing means a lot to me and to a lot of people, and this model has been brought, all around the country. I want to go to Robert says he's got a couple questions, but I'll go to the Scotland, England one, Justin.
Cool.
Robert says, of Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland, and Ireland, so all of the UK plus Ireland, are there any stand out as having more progressive drug policy? Okay, that's a good question.
It's a really good question. Unfortunately not. I'd say that all have pretty bad drug policies. Some of that is to do with devolution policy. So health policy is devolved to the devolved nations, so Wales and Scotland. They control their own health, but not their own drug policy. Equally, more could be done within policing strategy in those places, which isn't really being done. In some parts of England, we have a kind of, I don't know, do you guys use the term diversion schemes over there?
Diversion.
So we have some diversion schemes in action, which were started by police, essentially, who saw that the criminalization of people who use drugs was completely pointless. And it was interesting to see that they were the ones who stepped up to create a kind of legal loophole, for lack of a better way, of deprioritizing the possession of drugs, which have been pretty good. Like reoffending rates have been significantly lower. The engagement with the course is significantly, is rising. Unfortunately, no, I don't think there is really any countries in Europe with a fit for purpose drug policy, except Portugal.
Fit for purpose. I love that. Well, that leads to another question that Robert says, do you have something like what we call drug courts? So I guess, here in the United States, actually, I'm not quite sure all over in the United States, but certainly in Virginia, some municipalities, it's individual. At least in Virginia, it's individual by municipality, and probably all across the country. We've got a very disjointed and different system everywhere. We have these things called drug courts, and essentially it's a diversion tactic or a diversion scheme, if you will. It's a scheme has a really negative connotation in the United States.
Yeah, sounds like you're after something bad.
It does, yeah. But anyway, the drug courts are a thing here, and they I know Robert's got really strong opinions on this, and after actually something that just happened yesterday, I've got hugely negative, strong opinions on drug courts, and they're just not set up realistically. But anyway, do you have something like that? And essentially, you can get out early if you complete this drug court recovery box that they set for you. It's like, okay, if you do X, Y, and Z, you're fine, but if you screw up, you get sanctioned and you're gonna have to spend 6 days in jail. You screw up again, you're gonna have to do 12 days in jail and just disrupt everything that's going on in your life. Do you have something like this?
I believe so. And I think that, for example, if you're released early from prison, you might have to undertake drug tests. And if one of those drug tests come back as positive, then you're put straight back in the cell to serve out the rest of your sentence. I think, I can't remember what the figure is. People leave prison with something like £100 in this country. So most people leave with 100 quid in their pocket. They might have been in jail 5-10 years. Very few prospects, very few people left behind around them. And if you're changing your situation a lot and you're seen in your setting, then sadly a lot of people relapse immediately after coming out of prison. And speaking to Peter, who's the guy who runs the Overdose Prevention Centre, sort of van in Scotland, in Glasgow, was telling me a lot of the people he spoke to had literally come straight from prison with their £100, and it's the first thing a lot of people go to do. And that's no discredit to them. It's understandable because these people have been, quite frankly, failed by society, and drug usage in our prisons here is phenomenally high too. So I think more people come out as having a substance disorder than go in with having a substance disorder. But on the short of the question, I believe there are drug courts, but it sounds slightly different to the way the Virginia drug courts run. I could be wrong.
Well, it's and Robert knows way more about that than I do. I didn't go through a drug court. We did have an individual here, and who failed a drug test for alcohol, but we know there's no way she really failed that test. I mean, we know she didn't. We know she didn't use, and it's not even a question on anybody's mind here in the organization. She absolutely did not drink, and these tests are historically not 100% accurate. So the individual can pay $55 or $65 to have it sent to a lab to have another test done. And so when she did that, there was a discrepancy in the whole thing. So now, she can pay to have a hair follicle test done, and that's an exorbitant amount of money. Yes, of course. Well, that's it. Yes, it has to come out of the individual's pocket. So she absolutely has to go to jail. I think she went today, I think. And she's been very, very, open and like, I got to do this. I guess I'm not graduating from drug court in September, all these things that she, I saw her yesterday, talked to her for quite a while, and she's really stoic about what's happening. It's really, actually, it's really neat to see, it's like, I got to do this, but she's fighting it. And like, she's actually getting a lawyer, and she's going to fight it, and not for herself, because it's still going to go to jail for the 6 days, and she still has to go through the next. She won't graduate from drug court, yada yada, but she's doing it for the next person. So it's like, we're still, even with the drug court, even with a diversion tactics in place, or scheme in place, I love that word, even with diversion in place, she's still getting penalized for what is at its core a disease, So what are we doing? And so I've had people have this whole, well, we should change the word to recovery court. I'm like, well, that's great. We can call it anything we want. We can call it Madam whatever Tea Party or something, but it's still a failing system right here. So we have to get to the heart of that. But we don't want to trouble you about Virginia problems here. Debbie Rosenbaum, you don't have to put it up, Justin, but Debbie Rosenbaum, she had a question. Debbie's our board chair here at McShin, and she was asking about the difference in, I think you alluded to this earlier, the difference between the UK and the US marijuana laws, cannabis laws. And so you mentioned it being medicinally available, but also exorbitantly expensive. I had forgotten about the NHS component that you have there, and yay, you all. But I have a few questions on that.
Sure.
Can you get medical cannabis through NHS? And also, what are the recovery support services available to an individual who presents at an NHS-funded emergency department, or I guess you call them A&E? What do you, if I walk in with an overdose, if I come in, well, I won't walk in with an overdose. If I come in and I'm overdosing and you resuscitate me, what happens next? So I guess answer Debbie's question first. Sorry. And then we'll talk about that, because I have a lot of thoughts on that too. I would love to hear what you guys are doing.
Cool. So it's been a really difficult implementation of medical cannabis policy because of our NHS. Understandably, you can't just license anything to be on the NHS. So there's only been 2 drugs. One's called Sativex, one called Epidiolex. One is for MS and the other is for epilepsy. But because, one's just pure CBD, very high amount of CBD, and the other's a low amount of THC and a lot of CBD is my understanding. So in short, can you get dried flower on the NHS? No one has that. There's only 3 or 4 people who are on unlicensed NHS medicines, and those are for very particular conditions. It tends to be, there was a child called Billy Caldwell here who was sort of the boy who changed the law, and another called Alfie Deacon. But I think that we will see more of a rollout of that. Like, medical cannabis products are getting cheaper, but you have to go down the private route. So, I think I have a number of conditions that if I wanted to be a medical cannabis patient in the UK, I could do it. I don't really have £300 a month to spend though. So, it's steep. It's steep. The price is coming down. It's nothing against the clinics that offer that. They're doing the best they can, but it's kind of a necessity. So will we see cannabis on the NHS, dried flower on the NHS? Probably for very specific conditions, palliative care, people who maybe have terminal cancer. Will it be widely rolled out? No. Is that the right decision? I don't know. It's hard to say. It's a very particular healthcare system, as you rightly say. For me, there needs to be some kind of either an adult use market or something in the middle of the two, because there's people who have very severe conditions like, refractory epilepsy, who need this product and they need it in a medical setting. Others who might have really bad chronic pain, which is very debilitating, but they might want to vape dried flower. Do I have a problem with that? No. Is it medical? Yes. Will it be on the NHS? No. So there's a bit of a gap between the two markets, which needs some unpacking. And it's been 3 years now, so hopefully we can keep making some progress on that. And your other question, I've completely forgotten. My apologies.
Well, no. I tend to talk a lot and ask a lot at the same time. But continuing on the marijuana and the access, because I that was interesting. You kept mentioning dried flower. I believe in Virginia. Now, this is going to be different state to state because medical is different state to state. But in Virginia, I don't believe you can currently get flower for medical use. However, I believe that's about to change. So that's new. But we've had sorry about the noises. We've had oils and other products, edibles available, for the medical use. And so, I haven't been into a dispensary in Virginia. I have been in Vegas. I think it was last year, and other places. But right now you can't get flower, legally. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what we are. I guess the analogy here in the United States, I guess, would probably be Medicare and Medicaid. Yeah, but that's not the best analogy. Although in many states, and including Virginia, Medicare expansion Medicaid expansion allows for single people to be on it, and that just to get health care. That just went into effect like 3 years ago. Crazy,
Okay.
crazy. And that's Virginia. Not every state has that, but going into the next question, so what are the responsibilities? Like if I go into if I overdose and I am taken to A&E or emergency departments, what is the responsibility of the attendant physician or the caregivers there? Is there a team of people who come in and swoop in? Is there an arrest made? I mean, what happens to the individual? Walk us through that if you don't mind.
No worries at all. Now, I think I'll give a few different scenarios. I think a lot of it is predicated on whether the nurse or doctor whose responsibility it is to look after this person who's come in with an overdose, whether they decide that this is a criminal matter that they'd like to refer to the police, or whether they decide that they don't want to refer it to the police. Now, there are certainly people who overdose and are sent to hospital, who then the police, turn up at the property where they might have overdosed, or then question the person if, fingers crossed, they come out alive from that overdose. But there's no one system. Again, I think it depends a lot on the health professional. I mean, the ideal would be to have a consultation when that person's feeling better, to find out some of the potentially mitigating factors behind this and what the best way to help that person is. But I fear all too often that someone going into hospital with an overdose, whether that be taking too many pills at a nightclub or a heroin overdose in whatever setting, that a criminal investigation follows. I think that's sadly quite common. And again, it does absolutely nothing to help that person. And the really negative thing that it does, that I'm sure you're aware of, is that a lot of people now won't go to hospital if their friend, their peer, their colleague, or themselves are overdosing, because they might have more stuff in the house, or someone else might have just used, or they're scared of the criminal repercussions of that. And that's hugely problematic, which is a big argument for the decriminalization of possession, right?
Absolutely. We've had some success in the United States and certainly in Virginia in the last couple of years with enhancing our Good Samaritan laws, specifically around drug use. And these are born out of, really severe, horrible cases where individuals OD'd and were found in closets days later, or in one particular instance, a person I knew who was left in a ditch, to die. And so, people who were not given taken in, given access to proper health care in the first place. So what we've done is we've been able to get, the law to be, and this is the funny thing with I'm not gonna say that. But this is what'll happen is an individual can, if an individual is experiencing a substance use related emergency, overdosing, and another person calls, up until a few years ago, the person calling would be sort of immune from prosecution, if they, talk to the police and worked with them, blah, 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 blah. But the person overdosing would get a possession charge. Absolutely. Yeah. And so that did change. The law changed to give the protect the person overdosing and the person making the phone call. Well, here's the kicker. So that changed a couple years ago, and between that time and the very next session, the next General Assembly session, there was an instance where an individual made a phone call, and another individual used Narcan to revive the person that was overdosing, but the person who used Narcan, that person was arrested for possession because that person was not the person making the phone call or the person overdosing. So we had to go back and actually get that law amended again to fix that situation, that scenario, so that we have, actually the Good Samaritan, actually helping out. So it's a little better. There's certainly, the defelonization, the decriminalization certainly would make that even better. Certainly let's get people the help they need. But we're really trying to make that, that get that out there, that information out there, that if you are experiencing an overdose, if the best thing to do, if the person next to you is overdosing, is to call, the cops, or call for emergency services, which of course is going to include the cops. But as far as somebody going to the hospital goes here, there's a tendency to treat and street around here. You treat the overdose and you street them right back out without giving any discussion about what recovery might mean, long-term aftercare. some of the hospitals around here are pushing for and are getting peers in the emergency departments. So we call them in Virginia, we call them certified peer recovery specialists. And it's an individual with lived experience who's been trained and can sit there and meet the person where they're at, literally, and perhaps do some follow-up aftercare, in terms of perhaps helping to make sure that, the individual sees what resources are available. Personally, when I was first arrested for my first charge, it wasn't my fault. It was everybody else's fault. I didn't have a problem. Everybody else had a problem. And I don't know that you could have told me something different, but nothing was offered to me. Nothing was shown to me. I didn't know what recovery was. I thought AA was a bunch of old, dirty old men in a basement smoking cigarettes, chain smoking. NA was a bunch of crazy people in my view. So I didn't have an idea of what recovery was until really I found a jail program. But I don't think everybody needs to find a jail program. I think we can do that before we get the criminal justice system involved. So Debbie says, oh, well, there we go. Anthony, are you familiar with Good Samaritan laws? How do you all handle this? So I think we just I think we just discussed a lot of that. But do you have any thoughts on that? On what I would
So I've never actually heard obviously I know Good Samaritans, but I never heard the term, to be honest. And I don't think, unfortunately, you get much leeway here. I mean, it doesn't sound, I think you'd be unlucky to get done for a possession offense if you were the person going into hospital. But you can land yourself in other sorts of issues. You definitely you're more likely than not be questioned after the incident. I mean, it was interesting you talked about, you call it Narcan there. Naloxone's the same thing, right?
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah, okay. So, but there's some great work here from a guy called George Charlton, who has lived experience. He's, I think he considers himself still in recovery. He doesn't use substances anymore anyway. He has rolled out peer-to-peer naloxone here, which has been highly successful because obviously you can train lots of people in naloxone, but the peers who are with the person potentially at the same time as they are having an overdose are more likely to be able to get their own time to save that person. So there's a big movement going on in the UK for that, being led by this guy called George Charlton. I think that's a fantastic initiative, which genuinely saves countless lives. And once you have a peer who can train another peer, the net spreads like crazy, and it's a really positive initiative. But no, in short, hearing these Good Samaritan laws, I didn't know a great deal about them, and it's really interesting to hear and quite depressing to hear that if you have an overdose, you will be charged with a possession offense. I mean, that's not going to do any good. And talk about recycling the cycles of criminality and the cycles of that kind of toxic cycle that's really hard to get out of. So no, my heart goes out to anyone struggling with those issues.
Well, Matt, it also speaks to the discrepancy in the way the law is across the United States, and each different state, or for instance, I had a possession charge in Virginia, and as I told you, that's a felony up to 10 years in prison. Now, it was my first offense, so we have a first offender law, and if I had done everything I was supposed to do the right way according to the law for 2 years straight, I would have gotten rid of that. Well, I'm a person in recovery, which means that I was a person who used substances to a destructive measure, and so I continued to use, and therefore, instead of doing what I was supposed to do for 2 years, I used, and I blew that out of the water and became a felon. I was arrested in Washington, D.C. For another possession charge. Misdemeanor right off the bat. And I had a lot more on me at the time. Misdemeanor right off the bat. And I knew that I wouldn't serve any time in DC, although it was a possibility, but not really going to happen. I would pay a fine. But what I knew that I wouldn't serve any time in DC, but I would serve time in Virginia because I would violate probation and bring new charges in. So I was able to work with the DC courts, and I was already in recovery. I was already here at McShin, and I was already doing the things because I knew that I needed to do them, not because I was trying to get out of anything, but because I was doing that, because I was able to show, what, it was a blip. I don't want to be living that. Well, it wasn't a blip, but I was able to show that I'm working on the problem and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I was able to get rid of those charges. But if I hadn't gotten rid of those charges and had been convicted, even as a misdemeanor with no jail time in DC, I would have violated in Virginia. I would have spent 6 to 9 months in Virginia, which is, it's catastrophic to everything. To anybody who's in recovery, starting out new and fresh, it's like, all right, I'm starting to get my jobs back and getting, the systems I need for recovery, transportation. You lose your license in Virginia with a felony, you lose your license, with a drug conviction. So, you're getting that back and starting to reintroduce my sober self to my family and my friends again and all those things. And then to just uproot people and put them right back in jail is absolutely insane to me. But anyway, I'll go on and on and on about that. But
no, it's completely bizarre. I mean, is there an issue with drug usage in prisons in the US as well?
Absolutely. That's the insane part. They say we can't arrest our way out of it. They say this all the time. I've heard sheriffs tell me this all the time. We cannot arrest our way out of addiction, right? I hear it all the time. And then I hear those same people talk about, well, how are we going to get people into recovery if they don't go to jail first? Well, how about this? There's drugs in the jails and prisons. It's like, come on, man. Get them out here. Let us, peers in recovery with lived experience, let us help more and more and more. And we're breaking those barriers down. Like, here with COVID now, sort of, well, we won't talk about the upswing, but at least here in Virginia right now, kind of mellow. We've been able to get our programs back into the jails. And this is a huge part of what McShin does, is the outreach into the jails and prisons. And so, and I'll remind me to tell about where we take the podcast from there. But it's a huge part of what we do. So we just got ourselves back into Richmond City Jail. So the we sorry about the sound stuff. We have peers in recovery who can go into the jails, on a regular basis. This is where I found recovery, a jail program up in Warrenton, Virginia. And we have our peers who can go in and discuss. And often, at least with me, where I was, the guy who came in on a regular basis, he'd been in the same place I was, literally the same jail cell with the same jail pod.
Exactly,
And so that to be able to do that work, and we've worked really hard to eliminate the barriers on that, the barrier crimes, because obviously if you've been in the jail, you're going to have a criminal record. But these are very much contingent on municipality to municipality to municipality. Some places are keen to have the peers come in. Some places you can't do this. So how does that work for you all? How is it, as far as bringing recovery into the jails and prisons in the UK? Like, how does that work?
I don't know if peers who aren't specifically trained with an agency are able to go in. I don't know how sort of formalized that is. There are recovery programs offered in prison. I think you can go the abstinence way, which I think is the most common, or I believe you can still be on a script in prison. But the issue, I think, is just that it's easier to get drugs. I mean, I haven't been to prison, so I'm speaking from what other people have told me, but it's much easier to get drugs in prison than it is outside of prison. So yeah, a lot more people come out addicted to a substance than go in addicted to a substance. And no matter how tough you make these prisons to smuggle drugs in, there will always be a new way. There was a recent press story in the UK where these synthetic cannabinoids that I was talking about, spice, is turned into a liquid, put onto paper in books. They'll put it on like page 70, 71, and 72. And then people rip paper and use that as the cigarette paper. And no matter what you do, people always smuggle them in. So I'm very pro getting peers into prisons in the UK, but I don't know how formal that is. I suspect maybe prison to prison basis, it probably changes depending on, is it the Warren? Is that what you call the sort of high up prison guard?
Warden, yeah, but sheriffs in the jails. I mean, it depends. They have different names, different places. But yeah, no. Often it's the sheriff who we get to meet and has the opportunity to put those programs in. And we've had good relationships with the jails around here. And McShin being around for 17 years, we've been trying to do the most good where we can. Anthony, I'll tell you. So the coolest thing that we do with this stuff here, and I don't know if I mentioned this to you in email or not, but we take this podcast And we give this podcast to a company called Paytel, but they put material, or they put information, media on tablets for individuals who are incarcerated. So across the country, and we give this to them for free, and they put these on these
Right.
tablets for free, and individuals who are incarcerated are able to watch these podcasts. I think we're in 48 different prisons and jails across the country.
Wow.
And so that's actually our biggest audience, and I love that. Absolutely
Yeah.
love that. And this was born out of the COVID, the COVID-19, but certainly it's something we're going to continue doing, because I think it's my favorite thing it's my favorite thing that we do with here. It's one of my favorite things that I do in my job. I love that, because that outreach is just so personal. I was a person
Yeah.
in a jail cell at one point, um, needing that hope shot. And we can sit here and talk policy all day. When it comes right down to it, the person sitting across from me, doesn't want to talk about what the law could be in 5 years. The person sitting across
Yeah.
from me just wants a hope shot. They just wants to know that, what, something can be better than this. Life doesn't have to be this miserable, dark place. So,
No,
and
that's incredible.
yeah,
It's an amazing initiative, and yeah, it's great to reach people. And as you said, with your sort of personal lived experience of having served some time in prison, I'm sure it's equally kind of cathartic is the word, but to know that this is getting out to the people who might really want the advice, might really want to talk, or just have a friendly voice like yourself, and likewise for yourself, giving something back to people who might be struggling. And we've talked about probably the difficulty of being in recovery in prison. It's not the easiest place to be, with a lot of time to think and a lot of dangerous substances around you. So no, that's incredible. And I wish anyone watching all the best with their long-term recovery, or the difficulties in spending time in a penitentiary.
we're getting close to an hour here, Anthony, and I've barely been able to scratch the surface of what gets you into the work that you're doing. And so,
Sure.
and really, we've mentioned Voltface, Voltface. Only I'm always going to say it that way. It's just
Oh
Voltface.
yeah, no, I love it.
And the hand has to come out too. Voltface.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably relatives from way back. Um, what gets you into this work, man? What gets you motivated to do this stuff? Not
So
the money, I'm sure.
no, so I mean, I've had some. I won't name names, but there's been people in my family who've suffered with various addictions, not just alcohol and other drugs, but gambling and all sorts. And there's something really interesting in that. I think the childhood trauma commonality that exists definitely rings through in my family with certain members, and seeing the loneliness of the situation that they had to encounter, how they had to go through it pretty much on their own, how as you said, when you were first sort of offered other routes, people don't know what's available to them. People really don't. That information is difficult to get. Being someone who is either still using or previously used, it's still horribly stigmatized, and it's really sad and lonely. And it made me want to focus on trying to change policies. I looked briefly at working sort of in the treatment sector. It wasn't quite my skill set, not quite what I wanted to do, but I'm lucky in my job that I can do the kind of policy engagement work on one side, but I still get to do to speak to a lot of people in recovery. I get to work with people who are in recovery, and sort of try and work more on those social justice issues. So just seeing the harms that drugs have caused to people close to me and to society in this country, and knowing that there is an alternative, better way. And I think that certainly I can see a better route. I think, although we've been hammering this door for quite a long time, I think stuff is slowly but surely getting better. And I want to see drug deaths decreasing, not increasing. I want to see stigmatization decreasing, not increasing. And I really think we're getting close to seeing some concrete change. And I've been watching the US with a very keen eye, and maybe I was a little bit too optimistic about Joe Biden when it comes to drug policy, but hopefully save some lives and, you know, reverse this opioid crisis in the US.
Well, yeah, it's we have to remember, you know, we have another party, and you know, as I like to say, recovery's purple, which is to say, you know, red side for, you know, one side and blue for another side. It's actually purple for so many reasons, because we do find allies, you know, in both political spheres, and I think it is important, at least for me, at least, to engage as many good actors as possible, you know, working for a common goal, which is to reduce the deaths and the destruction that are caused by addiction, substance use disorder. Is there anything that we have missed that you want to talk about, Anthony?
Not off the top of my head. I'm just trying to, I mean, just one closing point, and I guess it's fresh in our memories here as the figures were only released last week. But yeah, for the 8th consecutive year, drug-related deaths have reached unprecedented levels, i.e. figures never ever seen before. I guess I'd just like to, you know, if anyone in the UK, if any politicians happen to be tuning in, just, yeah, please, and any members of the public in the US or the UK, you know, feel confident to talk about these issues, try and remove the stigma of drugs, show compassion to people who use drugs as, you know, as you'd like to be treated yourself. And yeah, hopefully we can see some positive changes. You know, it doesn't all have to be bad. And I wish everyone watching this in recovery the best of luck with the continued recovery. It's hugely impressive, and yeah, total admiration.
Yeah, the numbers here in the United States, 93,000 overdose deaths last year, and that's up 30%. In Virginia, we were up 30%. We were up 41% in Virginia. I think it was 2,308. I just looked up the number last night, over whatever it was the year before that, but it was a 41% increase. And that's, you know, that's looking at all the, and that's what actually was reading that last night that was making me think, you know, that we keep looking at all these analogs of fentanyl. I'm like, what if we just stop doing that and just go to the real problem, which is all of the abandonment, the child, you know, the adverse childhood effects that have caused trauma that have caused the actual causes of addiction. You know, stop looking at carfentanil or fentanyl or whatever analog, and just like, let's work on that. So as we keep going here, or as we keep going, you know, in the future, I really love that you came on here, man. I love talking to you. I hope that we have you back on to talk some more. And I know that you have a little bit of a journey to go, so I do want to hear more about your journey going forward, whether personally on the side or whether we do this here. But can we look at the comments real quick? I think there was, I just want to make sure. Let's see if you, oh, okay. Anthony says, I'm sorry, Debbie says, Debbie's really cool. So Anthony, I'm glad you brought this up, Debbie, because I was thinking that earlier. There's a movie called The Anonymous People by Greg Williams, and the McShin Foundation and John Shinholzer are pretty prominent in it, but there's also people all across the country.
My internet went down for 1 second, but I've just seen the comment from Debbie. My apologies. We went the whole hour and it didn't go, and then in the last second, Debbie, I'll definitely give it a read. I've never come across it before, but I'm gonna take that down straight after this, and I'll feed back either to yourself or to Nathan to let you know what I think. It sounds great, so I'll definitely take a look. Greg Williams sounds very familiar, so I might have come across it, but I'll definitely give it a read.
It's a movie, actually.
Oh, it's a movie. Oh, my apologies.
Oh, even better. You don't have to give it a read. You can just lay back.
I was going to say, I'll watch it tonight then.
And Robert says, what is the best way to keep abreast of drug policy in the UK and Europe? We didn't really even talk about the rest of Europe.
No, it's a really good question. So the organization that I work for, Voltface or Voltface, we cover European stuff. We're mostly UK focused, but we look at, you know, European reforms. Other than that, there's another think tank which is sort of similar to Voltface called Transform Drug Policy Foundation. They're really good at looking at kind of EU wide and beyond that. You know, they do stuff in South America as well. There's a great Scottish outlet called The Ferret, which is very focused on drug policy matters. Robert, I'll send some links over. Again, I'll send them to yourself and Nathan. I don't know if you want to distribute them and work the best way out. Did
you say The Ferrets? Like
the ferret, yeah, as in like a animal? Yeah, exactly. But no, I'll send over a list of resources. There's some really good stuff, and we're seeing some interesting reforms over here, slowly but surely. We'll hopefully get some fit for purpose drug policies.
Oh, especially eager to hear what you are able to accomplish with the conservative government. So, our guest today, right, our guest today is head of communication with Anthony with Voltface. Anthony, I just screwed that all up. Let me start that again. Second take. Our guest today is Anthony Lehane, head of communications with Voltface. Coming over here across the pond from London. It's what, 8 o'clock your time?
8 o'clock, 8 p.m. That's right. Yeah.
Go get your dinner or whatever you need to do. It dawned on me when you mentioned 10 million people in London. The entirety of the Commonwealth of Virginia is 8.8, I think 8.9 million people. So you have more people in London than you have in our entire state.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and of course we're much more distributed in a bigger piece of land.
I was going to say, yeah, we're very dense.
Very dense, yeah. We're very dense here too.
I was going to say we're dense here in more than one way. Certainly when it comes to drug policy.
Certainly, but I hope to have you back, and certainly keep in touch. Yeah.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for tuning in. I've really enjoyed it. We'll keep in touch. I'll send over some resources, and I look forward to speaking to you guys next time. Nathan, thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure.
Great. Thank you for being here. Glad you're feeling better. Thank you, everybody. We're going to just sign off. Bye. Thank you, Justin.
Thanks so much, guys. Take care.
Here at McShin, we believe in the McShin way, which is authentic recovery support service providers, people with lived experience, bringing that experience to those who need that lived experience in recovery.
Here at McShin, we believe in many things to support our mission. We believe in women empowerment.
What I love most about what we believe here at McShin is we believe in the authenticity of the peer-to-peer approach.
Here at the McShin Foundation, we believe in giving people opportunity.
Here at McShin, we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
At the McShin Foundation, we believe in helping people reach their full potential.
Here at the McShin Foundation, we believe in multiple pathways to recovery.
Here at McShin, we believe in placing principles before personalities to help spread hope.
Here at McShin, we believe that recovery is possible and that any person seeking recovery can become a more acceptable, responsible, and productive member of society.
Here at the McShin Foundation, we believe in self-discovery.
Here at McShin, we believe in saving lives and offering second chances.
Here at McShin, we believe you can do this.
Here at the McShin Foundation, we believe that we can only keep what we have by giving away, which is why we continue to help others like us seek and find recovery.
Any place.